Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of This Is In. This is the very first in-person This Is In, so I'm glad to be here. I'm Addison Pollock. I'm one of the directors of community engagement with AARP Indiana, and joining me today is a special guest, Leigh Purvis, who is AARP's prescription drug policy principal. Leigh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. Thanks for being here. So Leigh is responsible for the research and the policy making around AARP's long fought battle to lower prescription drug prices. So Leigh, I want to wish you congratulations on a relatively recent landmark win with legislation that allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices, caps annual out-of-pocket prescription drug costs in Medicare Part D, and much more. So since you're here for a special occasion in the Hoosier State. Just wanted to kind of pick your brain and ask you a few questions today. So can you tell me a little bit more about the win that I just outlined, as well as why you're here in the Hoosier State?
Sure. So the law that you're talking about is actually historic. There is really no other way to put it. This is a law that includes a lot of different provisions that are help reduce prescription drug prices and prescription drug out-of-pocket costs. And there are a lot of different changes in there that are going to benefit millions of people, particularly in Medicare. So you mentioned like Medicare negotiation. Medicare is going to be negotiating the prices of some prescription drugs. There's also going to be a new out-of-pocket limit for people in prescription drug plans, and that's going to be $2,000 next year. We're also seeing some caps for insulin. You now won't have to pay more than $35 per month for insulin if you're in Medicare. There's also a lot of changes around vaccines. Recommended vaccines are now free for people in Medicare. There's also a provision that penalizes drug companies that increase their prices faster than inflation. So there's a lot of different changes in there that are going to result in some significant savings for a lot of people.
Right. It's music to my ears. I'm just smiling as you're saying all this. That's fantastic, and I'm really excited to see this play out in people's lives, and the 50 plus who AARP represents, and just showing how it impacts their and their families' lives. So I understand that there's a lot of features in this legislation that are activated over a course of time. So can you kind of run that timeline down for us? So what should members in the 50 plus expect going into 2025?
Yeah, I always like to remind people that changes of this magnitude take time. So there is a definite rollout associated with this law. The provisions that are already in effect are the penalties for drug companies that increase their prices faster than inflation, those free recommended vaccines, the $35 cap on insulin copays. There's also actually an expansion for the extra help program under Medicare Part D, which helps people with low incomes and assets, and that can provide a lot of cost savings for people in that program. Starting this year as well, people who enter what is known as the catastrophic phase of the Medicare Part D program no longer have to pay anything after they reach that part of the program, which is a really big important change because previously they would have to pay 5% of their costs until the end of the year. And that would result in some people paying upwards of $10,000 just for those prescription drugs. Starting next year, the new $2,000 out-of-pocket cap starts for people in prescription drug plans. And then starting in 2026, you will start to benefit from those new negotiated prices. So lots of big, important changes coming in the next few years.
Wow, that's great. Are we seeing some of the consumer protections around, drug prices rising faster than the price of or cost of inflation or the rate of inflation? Are we seeing that play out currently right now?
Yes, this is unfortunately something that drug companies have been engaging in for a very long time. I've actually been tracking prescription drug prices for most of my time at AARP, and what we have found is that very consistently, those prices have increased much faster than inflation every single year. And so these penalties are relatively new. And what we have seen is that the Medicare program is identifying those drugs that do have those price increases that are faster than inflation and are making sure that people are not being affected by that, specifically for drugs that are under Medicare Part B as in boy, which are drugs that are administered by your doctors. So those changes are having an effect and they are affecting cost sharing already. And we're very hopeful it's going to stop drug companies from engaging in those types of big price increases in the future.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I love to hear the fact that because I know that there's some runway with these changes, but I love to know that there are some that are happening currently today, so can benefit consumers out there. So how we're an advocacy organization. How vigilant do we as advocates need to be to see that these changes stay on track going into the future?
I would say that consumes the vast majority of my time right now, to
Okay.
be honest. Yeah, so the law itself is, of course, being implemented. So there's a lot of things that need to happen within the government. For example, Medicare had never negotiated drug prices before. So they've had to set up a whole new program, and there's a lot of work that's involved with that.
Mhm.
So AARP has been heavily engaged in kind of working and providing comments wherever we can on guidance documents and kind of how they're planning to implement these programs. And then, of course, we've also been incredibly active on the legal side. I think a lot of people are aware that the drug companies have been suing in a lot of different places. I think the count right now is 8 different court cases that are working their way through. And AARP has been filing amicus briefs where we strongly defend the right of Medicare to negotiate drug prices. And that is something we'll continue to engage in as well. So, yeah, a lot of work, a lot of defense work ahead.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it doesn't just end with the legislation passing, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, not. No.
We can only wish. So, what do you think is you listed out, all these consumer protections in different facets that make this really strong legislation that benefit, Hoosiers 50 plus, everyone, all Americans 50 plus, and all folks who take prescription drugs. So, what do you think the most impactful part of that legislation is?
That really is like trying to choose your favorite child.
Sure.
But I'm going to say the one's particular for me because I do know that the reality is the reason that people are struggling with prescription drug costs is because of those underlying prices. So to me, the most important changes are Medicare negotiation because that will help bring down prices. And of course, there's penalties for price increases because that will help those prices stop from increasing as quickly as they have. The out-of-pocket costs, though, those changes are incredibly important as well because there's just something people feel directly and quickly. So I think, the insulin copay caps, the free recommended vaccines, and the fact that those prices won't be growing the same way they were, that will help out of pocket costs as well. A lot of people aren't aware that people in Medicare often pay co-insurance where they're paying a percentage of the drug's price. So when you actually address the price of the product, your cost sharing goes down as well. And so we're going to see changes in a lot of different ways, but the prices are what's driving a lot of what we're seeing. So the fact that we're addressing that, I think, is probably the best from the consumer perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go on a tangent here, but you mentioned insulin.
Yes.
So it's insulin is capped at $35 for folks who utilize Medicare. Are we going to be seeing changes to expand that beyond, or?
That is certainly something that we're hoping to see, and it actually goes beyond insulin. A lot of the ideas that are contained in the Inflation Reduction Act are very popular, and so we're
Sure.
seeing efforts both at the federal and the state level to expand them to other populations as well. So our hope and expectation, and of course AARP's goal, is to make sure that other people can benefit from these changes as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, because 50 plus, that encompasses a lot of folks who aren't eligible for Medicare. So that's fantastic. So what's next for you? And I kind of, this was a segue here. What's next for you to help develop policy and fight to lower prescription drug prices? What should we expect to see in the future?
I would say that this fight is definitely ongoing, and AARP has said we aren't going to stop working on this issue until everyone can afford the drugs they need. So, of course, part of that is going to be implementing the Inflation Reduction Act, but then a lot of that also is going to be additional changes. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet when it comes to addressing high prescription drug prices, and so there's also a lot of work focusing on improving competition. There are a lot of bills that would help ensure that generic drugs, much less expensive generic drugs and less expensive biosimilar drugs, reach the market as quickly as possible because there are a lot of what I call drug company shenanigans that are happening in the
Sure.
market that really delay the availability of those products. And we want to make sure they get to people as quickly as possible. So I think that's going to be a big part of the fight going forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we will definitely make sure that we're getting that information to ARP Indiana members and making sure that we're the wise friend and fierce defender. So, Leigh, I just want to thank you so much for stopping by today. This has been awesome. How can viewers keep up with the continued fight that ARP is leading to lower prescription drug prices?
Anyone who wants to learn more about our work in this area could go to aarp.org/rx.
Nice. All right. Well, I encourage you all to check out that web link. And Leigh, is there anything else that you want to cover today?
No, this has been great, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk about this. And again, I can't overstate the importance of this new law and how much it's going to help so many people. So really happy to have been a part of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Leigh, for being here. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next time.